Welcome back, HubSpot professionals. I am joined today with Daniel Semenuk out of QBS, and I've been actually really looking forward to this conversation because you came from working with multiple clients across multiple portals at the same time to being in-house and focusing on just one portal. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us a little bit about the work that you do at QBS day to day.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Daniel. I come from organizations that are in the anywhere from finance to insurance and legal and manufacturing. I've worked with a lot of clients over the years, both as a freelancer and in an agency model. And I realized that I was doing a lot of the same type of work over and over again. Um, Auditing workflows is definitely one of them. And about 6 months ago, I was working across six or seven different portals and was dealing with workflow environments that were 800 different workflows firing for all different reasons. And I was sitting there looking at Claude, wondering how I could build something to kind of look at everything at a like kind of high level view. And then I found Howley through a LinkedIn post and decided to kind of check it out. Um, and when I decided to make the move back to more of an internal role, I was prioritizing a mission forward company like QBS that really cares about making a difference in people's lives. But I really needed an organization that was at a maturity level that could handle internalizing go-to-market engineering and RevOps and marketing automations and operations. Naturally, when I'm walking into a new portal at this point, across multiple clients, it just makes sense to turn on Howley so I can kind of get a bird's eye view and figure out what I'm looking at. And that rationale didn't change when I started with QBS. It was one of the first things that I wanted to do because
Mhm.
I wanted to be able to come in the door and help this great team make a great impact out the gate.
Love it. I love to hear you say that. As far as your like day-to-day work in HubSpot, what does that look like for a go-to-market engineer?
Yeah, so the HubSpot ecosystem is vast, right? Like not only
Hmm.
do you have all the hubs, but then you have all the other stuff that you can factor in, the enrichment softwares, the data services, any number of different intent software, what have you. But primarily in HubSpot ecosystems, you have to focus on HubSpot. So the big thing for me as the manager of marketing and go-to-market engineering, I'm focusing in the lead and deal pipeline areas and assigning territories and the workflows that go into taking our marketing efforts at a lot of our customers and prospects really like attending our webinars and making sure they're in the know on when we're going to be at conferences and getting in touch with us directly because they have a defined need already. And
Hmm.
when we get those customers, we need to make sure that or prospects, we need to make sure that we're getting them to the right people at the right time. And our team is very human centric. And what Howley does is it gives us an opportunity to have human hands on something, even if it all lives digitally within the HubSpot.
So thank you for sharing. And for those of us who might not be familiar with QBS, uh, could you give us a high-level overview of what QBS does?
Yeah, so QBS is a really mission forward organization that is been around for about 30 years. We focus on behavioral de-escalation and crisis management within a lot of different vulnerable populations, specifically um, K through 12 educational systems, ABA centric organizations, hospitals, and really anywhere that we have groups of people who have populations that have challenges with behavior. The problem that people have in those situations is how do we prevent crises from really erupting? Because that creates unsafe environments for everybody involved, especially with really vulnerable populations like children, the disabled, what have you.
Mhm.
So KBS is unique, though, is that all of our tactics are driven through clinical validation. So we're really focused on the um, not just the idea of being reactive and being able to have a plan of attack on something that happens. We're focused on a much more proactive approach using science and data driven decision making to really give groups of people the ability to make good judgment calls because they're already trained on how to make them versus reading a pamphlet when something's already happening.
Thank you. And speaking of making good judgment calls, I think we should talk about HubSpot workflows, and I think we should talk about uh, being back in-house, coming from working across multiple clients with multiple portals at the same time. What does that look like in Howley, and how does Howley help your day to day?
Yeah, so what's really great about working with multiple portals is that I mean, to be honest, the expectations are lower when you're hired on as a fractional or a consultant or through an agency.
Mhm.
Uh, in my experience, clients don't expect you pulling rabbits out of hats on day one. Like they
Yeah.
expect a long audit process. They expect to have a lot of strategic type meetings to at least get the ball rolling on things. Whereas in an environment like that with a tool like Howley, you can very quickly get a lot of the high level auditing done.
Hmm.
So it really shows like bang up value out the gate when you're working across multiple instances, especially where the expectations are maybe a little bit more conservative compared to uh, hiring somebody to own something full time. Now, making that transition, I knew that part of my role's expectations for QBS is to own HubSpot end to end.
Hmm.
And what that means to me is that I'm going to be internal responsible for owning a very core business system utilized by a lot of different people for a lot of different functionality. So that adds a level of seriousness and ownership to the role. But the fact that this role that I decided to accept was really focused on that ownership piece at the granular level on top of the overall strategic orchestration level. So while Howley provides that bang up value for like that, it's almost like a surprise and delight when you're working across multiple portals because you can get a lot of health check and kind of gut check done right out the gate. Moving into an internal role, you have to be able to move quickly.
Hmm.
You don't get to walk into a go-to-market engineering role internally with an organization that is hiring for a go-to-market engineer. You don't get 90 days to analyze a portal and come up with an audit and then decide what priorities are. You have to know where to act and how to act to start getting wins on the board. Because it's not just about finding a new agency at that point. They're trusting you with the health of their business. You need to be able to demonstrate that without just getting tally marks up on the board.
Hmm.
It needs to be a much more strategic feeling we made the right choice. And Howley is one of those tools that, even for smaller internal teams, can be extremely valuable because you can get an idea of where you need to go while also getting an idea of what you can work on today, and that helps paint the longer term picture that an internalized role really is designed to do.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the biggest use cases for using Howley internally in-house is that organizations have been through, multiple consultants or multiple agencies. And so there oftentimes, at least I'm finding this myself, is you have workflow debt or workflow archaeology of sometimes you come into a brand new instance, and especially, yeah, you're expected to make decisions on day one. But then if I'm finding workflows that are still running from 2021 about a webinar that the company did, well, that's an immediate win, right? Because you can now start to look at what needs to be archived, what needs to be removed, what's affecting or connecting to other workflows through things like properties or lists. And so that is how you can show your immediate value as an employee, right? Because these are some quick wins that Howley was able to surface, yeah, in 30 minutes, right? So those are some of the use cases that at least we hear on our side when we're talking with in-house experts and go-to-market engineers.
Yeah, I'm like chomping at the bit to respond to that because I
Yep.
like your terminology with like the technical and workflow debt
Mhm.
and then the technical workflow archaeology, right? and the burning from consultants and agencies, there first and foremost, there is absolutely nothing wrong with consultants and agencies and freelancers and anybody working in go-to-market engineering or RevOps or what have you.
Of
There
course.
are a lot of really great ones, and there are a lot of really great ones that have taken on projects that are just not what they're good at.
Hmm.
I've taken on projects that they're just something that I'm not good at. I'm sure at some point you've had a project that you're like,
Oh
this
yeah.
isn't quite, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
it's one of those things that you can get burned without it just being a bad agency. Like it can
Hmm.
just be a bad fit. And when you go through even like great agencies or great freelancers, that it's just not a good fit, you end up taking on even more technical debt because the problems just keep multiplying and snowballing because they're still existing while you're running through different people that you're hoping can just fix the problem. Um, the what's wild though is the debt piles up, and that's why an organization goes to a consultant or an agency or a freelancer or
Exactly.
goes to internalize the role because the debt's piling up and we got to chip away at the debt, right?
Hmm.
But then the natural thing is that now we have to go through archaeology. We have to go dig and dust off because we don't want to hurt anything. We don't want
Hmm.
anything to break, but we have to unearth what's actually going on so we can get the fossil out of the ground. And that used to be it still is in a lot of ways, but it's one of the most challenging and delicate parts of not only reconfiguring or rebuilding or building from scratch, but also ongoing maintenance of a portal and keeping
Hmm.
hygiene. A lot of
Hmm.
people think of technical debt as like data hygiene, and I do agree with that. That if you got duplicates everywhere and you got all sorts of things going on with your like associations breaking, what have you, those are separate problems, but they add to the technical debt. We Duplicate contacts are such a visual thing for people and such an easy thing to focus on. The workflow part is like the behind the curtain, like that's the
Hmm.
really like ugly elephant in the room that like is very, very challenging to really rationalize and wrap your brain around, especially because there's only so much time in a day. I can see three contacts with the same name and similar email addresses. That makes sense. When I look at 400 workflows and the rat's nest of wires connecting all of them, that looks like a tomorrow problem. And
Hmm.
because I don't have time to dig out that fossil today, unless you find a tool that can help you see where the fossil actually is, so when you kind of know where to dig.
I mean, yeah, and that's typically how it goes. And I think too, at least what we're seeing in the market is with HubSpot introducing the Breeze Assistant now being able to create workflows and seemingly allowing anyone on the team to create workflows. We do need some sort of governance on that. We do need some sort of oversight. And again, Howley is a perfect example of how you can govern your workflows because it is visualized on a canvas as opposed to being created in a list view, where the person responsible for owning workflows has to click through each one individually to see, well, are there any connections across properties or lists, or does this enroll into a separate workflow altogether? That's where something like Howley is a great tool to use as you're governing your stack.
When it comes to governance, permission sets are not bad. Like they are a requirement, right? We like even just think about it from the perspective of a new rep starts. We don't want a new rep to have super admin permissions on everything, not because they're going to go and nuke a HubSpot. It's because they just might make an adjustment they're just not even aware of if they've never really used it before, right?
Mhm.
So, so permission sets are very, 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 very important. However, they used to be one of the only ways to govern workflow creation because if you didn't, then you just end up with this big list of workflows, and yeah, you could kind of dump them into folders and what have you. But and you could maybe put your name on it or what have you. Like there's like a lot of different ways to organize, but ultimately, if you turn off the permissions for workflows to keep that layer of governance, which makes sense, then you create a new problem. New problem is a single point of failure or maybe a couple points of failure. The only people who are authorized to work on the workflows at that point, if something happens to them or they decide to take a vacation or you add a new team member that's supposed to be working with them, You're going to deal with issues with permissions, and you're going to deal with bottlenecks of, hey, can we please get this workflow created? I'm not saying that everybody needs permissions to create workflows and manage a workflow environment, but the reality is that a tool like Howley gives a new option for folks for organizations that want to give a little bit more of a leash to some of their team members without having to have hard line in the sand permission sets because you can see what people are working on.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity because I don't think that a lot of organizations, especially small, mediums, and mid-market type organizations, are really aware of how much of a jump you can get when you're in the aware. When you've now named your problem, you kind of know that your HubSpot's a little bit messy. Okay, great. You watch enough LinkedIn gurus and figure out like different solutions that you can do, but all that involves getting your hands in there, and not everybody wants to pick up the dusty brushes and the drills to start doing the archaeology, right?
Mhm.
But when you're going and you're trying to evaluate in the consideration stage that freelancer that was highly recommended from a friend, or that agency that you did business with at your last organization, or perhaps we have enough of a overall need to bring in somebody internally, and we're trying to figure out how is any of those options going to be successful. Everybody will pitch, right? And we're going to have to make a choice. But how can
Mhm.
we do our best as an organization to ensure that whatever solution we decide on is going to be successful? Howley offers a way for every organization of any size to get a visual on what their workflows look like and understand how things are connected and very quickly discern which things in their HubSpot are being touched and not so touched
Mhm.
and where some of the bottlenecks may actually be. Being able to take this information and present that back to the people that you're vetting to potentially solve this very crucial problem for your business, being able to hand them a bit of a map and say, this is what we've already discovered, will absolutely decrease the amount of time it takes to get to the success that you're looking for, especially with something as mission critical as your HubSpot.
I mean, yeah, the opportunity to solve this problem came from exactly that. Being tasked with auditing a HubSpot portal that you walk into for the first time, not only trying to figure out the business processes, but then trying to figure out what's important to keep versus what can be removed. And you, as a consultant or you, as an agency, very often you do it on a Lucid chart or a Miro, but still you're missing the context cues that might not be so obvious if you're mapping everything out statically. And then having to present that upwards, building from that map that you created, having to update that in real time. Pauli, I mean, if anything, solves at least the documentation headache.
When you're evaluating the different types of solutions that are available to deal with your workflow archaeology in your HubSpot, no matter how messy or clean your instance is, the reality is that everybody wants speed to impact. If you're interviewing people, you want the quick wins out of an agency, or you want your 30, 60, 90 day out of your internal hire, or whatever evaluation criteria you're doing. The simple fact is that do you want to wait 30 days for a comprehensive audit on every little change that you can make and then have to take action on it? Or do you want to know in 5 minutes what your top priorities are to address as a team to get speeding on what needs to be adjusted and where some of your bottlenecks are? Reality is that in this day and age where everything is moving fast, along with all of your competitors, you should probably pick the option that's going to give you at least something to work with as opposed to waiting on work to happen. Howley offers an opportunity for you to be able to very quickly see what properties are most affected by the workflows that are currently built, the ones that will be built, and the ways to free up the bottlenecks to ensure that what you're building isn't going to break anything and what is already built isn't going to affect anything negatively long term.